Good morning, everyone. My name is Muzi. I'm a postdoc working with Dr. Meng. Today, I'm going to talk about a paper project that we conducted by using ZEPSOM data. The topic is to what extent social support and coping strategies mediate the relationship between childhood maltreatment and major depressive disorder. Childhood maltreatment refers to various types of abuse and neglect experienced for children before 18 years of age, including physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, physical neglect, and emotional neglect. It is quite widespread across the world and can cause a number of serious and long-term consequences, such as being involved in violence, depression, obesity, high-risk sexual behaviors, and substance abuse. Childhood maltreatment has also been a heavy social and economic burden. Literatures have supported the strong association between childhood maltreatment and adult depression. However, not everyone who experienced maltreatment developed depression or other health problems. That is because their resilient attributes can buffer the negative consequences of maltreatment. Resilience refers to protective factors that can reduce the elastic load and thus prevent or intervene against the negative consequences of adversities and stressful events. As we have heard, NIF have introduced social support and coping strategies, and here I'm going to introduce more information about them. The social support and coping strategies are the most frequently studied protective factors that are consistently proved to reduce the risk of negative consequences of maltreatment. Social support refers to an individual's perception of being loved, cared for, respected, and valued by other members of the community. Social support can provide psychological and material resources in response to life stressors, which may benefit to individuals' health. Coping strategies refers to psychological patterns that individuals use to manage thoughts, feelings, and actions, and are usually categorized into positive and negative coping, or as known as adaptive and maladaptive coping. Some examples of positive coping strategies are like trying to solve the problem, speaking to others, and physical activities. Negative coping strategies can be, for example, more smoking, alcohol or drug consumptions, self-blaming, etc. From their definitions, we can tell that social support is physical and emotional comfort given to you by external environment, such as your family, friends, coworkers, and others in the community. While coping strategies is more intrapersonal, conscious or even unconscious strategies used to reduce unpleasant emotions. The previous studies have found that social support and positive coping strategies are associated with positive health outcomes in maltreated victims, and negative coping strategies are associated with more severe psychiatric health problems. Most of the studies were looking at the moderating effects of social support and coping strategies, but rather their mediating effects between the childhood maltreatment and mental disorders. So we all have known that social support and coping strategies play significant roles, but how? Then in this study, we are more interested in more detailed trajectories between childhood maltreatment and depression. So what happened after maltreatment? Does it affect people's social support, coping strategies, and the occurrence of depression at the same time? Or is there a sequential relationship among them? Since previous mediation studies are all cross-sectional and they are not able to define temporal order of those variables. And also social support and coping strategies were always studied separately. But as I mentioned earlier, they are actually two different personality traits. One is external and the other one is more internal. So we are interested in if they will affect each other and how will their relationship affect the risk of depression. So to answer these questions, the present study aimed to articulate the roles of social support and coping strategies in the relationship between childhood maltreatment and subsequent adulthood major depression with a clear temporal order of exposure, mediators, and outcome. And besides those social demographic characteristics, we also consider the genetic predisposition of major depression, PRS, in the model building, which may play a role in the development of depression. So generally, data on mediators and covariates were collected at wave 3, and major depression was collected at wave 4. Exposure to childhood maltreatment was collected at wave 5, but since it is a retrospective assessment for early life experience before 16 years of age, we still assume that the maltreatment occurred before the mediators and outcome. So we used ZEPSOM data and run two types of mediation models. The first one is parallel mediation model. It examined the direct effect of childhood maltreatment on depression and the indirect effect through the three mediators: social support, positive coping, and negative coping, respectively. So in this model, we assumed that all the mediators occurred at the same time. In other words, we examined their mediating effects in parallel. And then the second model is serial mediation model. They were used for a serial causal chain of the three mediators to triangulate the order of mediating effects. In other words, we examine which one changes the effect of subsequent mediators. Since the data on mediators were actually collected at the same time, so we included all the 6 potential causal chains in the analysis in terms of their different temporal orders of the mediators. We also conducted sensitivity analysis to examine whether any differences existed in subtypes of maltreatment for the results. So the ZEPSOM cohort has been followed up for 6 waves, as Sanfei just introduced. But since in this study, we only use the data from until wave 5. So wave 6 was not included in this flow chart. But as we all have known, over 2,400 participants were randomly selected to present residence in South West of Montreal in 2007. Follow-ups were conducted every 2 years. At wave 3, a second cohort was introduced to enlarge the participant pool. So by wave 5, 1,351 adults participated in the survey and provided their biospecimen for genetic information. And this is the sample we used for this study. Majority of them were female, French-Canadian, holding a post-secondary degree and were not diagnosed with major depression. This figure shows the parallel mediation models of four exposures. They are any type of childhood maltreatment, emotional abuse, physical neglect, and emotional neglect. These four exposures shared exactly same significance levels on the pathways in the model. That is, the exposure significantly increased the risk of depression, negatively associated with social support and positive coping strategies, and positively associated with negative coping. Then social support was negatively associated with depression, negative coping strategies was positively associated with depression. But the coefficient of the pathway from positive coping to depression was not significant. So only social support and negative coping strategies were partially mediated the relationship between the exposures and major depression. Then, but the parallel mediation model for physical abuse and sexual abuse showed some differences from the other subtypes of maltreatment. Physical abuse was not significantly associated with depression after adjusting for mediators. In other words, social support and negative coping strategies were fully mediated the relationship. For sexual abuse, only negative coping strategies fully mediated the relationship. Then we were wondering, what if these mediators didn't occur at the same time? There are 6 potential temporal orders among the 3 mediators, and the findings uniformly supported that they were correlated with each other and collectively involved in the process of maltreatment on depression. So this study reinforced the association between childhood maltreatment and subsequent development of depression, and social support and negative coping strategies mediated this relationship. Positive coping strategies per se was not a mediator, but it correlated with social support and negative coping strategies. These 3 mediators worked together to buffer the risk of depression. So overall, this present study provided a robust evidence of possible roadmaps of how social support and coping strategies following the childhood maltreatment predict later onset of major depression. This study suggests that preventing childhood maltreatment before it occurs is always the primary choice for the prevention of depression. But for those who already experienced childhood maltreatment, we would suggest prevention and intervention programs to focus on social support and coping strategies simultaneously, which means to not only provide an interpersonal supportive community or familial environment, but also to promote stronger intrapersonal management skills when facing stressful events. Because these resilience attributes can influence each other and have combined effects on subsequent mental disorders. It is quite important to increase social connections and relations at individual and organizational levels. For adults, interventions could help people knowing more, having a better idea how to reframe or interpret a relationship to be beneficial. But more importantly, it is critical to teach children how to make a friend, maintain a friendship, and how to face failure, etc. So in this way, when they turn to adulthood, they will have less barriers in social connections and emotions release. That's why we suggest that the prevention programs to intervene as early as possible. And finally, I would like to thank my supervisor and other co-authors for their contributions to this paper project. Thank you for your attention, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions if there's any.